What if I told you that the longer a man stays single, the stronger, sharper, and more emotionally untouchable he becomes? Most people assume long-term singleness means something is missing, but the Stoic truth, it often means something is being mastered. When a man stays alone long enough, he stops outsourcing his identity. He stops bending to please, is forging clarity, purpose, and power that few ever attain, and starts building silence into strength. Carl Jung believed that withdrawing from the world isn't weakness, it's transformation. If you're ready to understand why staying single is sometimes the highest path to inner strength, like this video, subscribe, turn on notifications, and comment. I build in silence. My future doesn't need approval. Number 1. When silence isn't emptiness, it's the beginning of power. What happens when the notifications stop, the voices disappear, and no one texts to ask where you are? For most men, that kind of silence feels like a verdict. Society has taught us to believe that being alone equals failure, that if no one is choosing you, messaging you, or seeking your presence, something is wrong. But here's the truth. Silence isn't a sentence. It's a stage. And for the Stoic man, it's the first step towards self-mastery. Picture this. You're sitting in your room. The light is dim. The phone hasn't lit up in hours. There are no plans tonight. No one asking to meet. The silence is thick, not just around you, but within you. Most people would reach for a distraction. A screen, a scroll, a shallow conversation. But what if you didn't? What if, instead of running from the quiet, you sat with it? That's when something shifts. The moment you stop filling the silence is the moment it begins to speak. And what it reveals first isn't pleasant. It's everything you've tried to suppress, regret over missed chances, the sting of a relationship that collapsed, the hollow feeling of chasing a life that doesn't feel like yours. The voice inside says, "You're not enough," and without anyone to interrupt it, it echoes. This is why so many men fear solitude, not because of the aloneness, but because of what it exposes. You can no longer perform. There's no audience to impress, no woman to seduce, no friend to validate your ideas. It's just you, raw, unfiltered, unadorned. And that moment, as terrifying as it is also sacred. Because only in that raw silence do you begin to see the truth. You are not your failures. You are not your followers. You are not the version of yourself that others have curated through expectation or memory. You are something deeper. And you would have never found it if you hadn't stopped to listen. Seneca, one of the great Stoic philosophers, once wrote, "No man was ever wise by chance. Wisdom, in the Stoic sense, comes from deliberate introspection, from confronting the pain of your own mind without flinching. And solitude offers you that mirror. It doesn't flatter. It doesn't lie. It just reflects. It shows you who you are when no one's watching. And if you can stand that version of yourself, even for a moment, you've begun to build something unshakable." Most men avoid this process by jumping from one relationship to the next, from one goal to another, constantly staying in motion so they never have to feel the weight of stillness. They chase women not for love, but for affirmation. They post not to express, but to be seen. They fill their days with noise, not out of joy, but out of fear that the quiet will call their bluff. But there is another kind of man, the man who walks into silence by choice, the man who knows that being alone isn't weakness, it's sharpening. He doesn't chase connection out of panic. He creates from stillness. He becomes magnetic, not because he's loud, but because he's centered. In the beginning, the silence will provoke every insecurity you've buried. You're forgotten. You're not enough. You're replaceable. But if you don't run, if you sit, breathe, and face those voices head on, you'll realize something powerful. Those voices are echoes, not truths. They're old ghosts of past rejection and outdated programming. And when you see them for what they are, they lose their power. That's when the real work begins. You start to rebuild from within, not by adding, but by shedding. You discard the false goals, the identities that weren't yours, the relationships that drained you. You stop pretending to enjoy things you hate. You stop apologizing for boundaries that protect your peace. You stop reaching just to be touched. Instead, you become still. You become rooted. You become sovereign. And from that place of inner quiet, a new voice begins to rise. Not desperate, not loud, but steady. It doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't need approval. It simply knows. That's your voice, the one that was buried under the noise of who you thought you had to be. And once it speaks, your world begins to align. You start showing up differently. Your gaze is more focused. Your words are more intentional. You no longer explain your worth. You embody it. In relationships, you no longer beg for attention. You no longer fear walking away. You understand that the value you bring isn't in how much you please. It's in how much you've mastered your presence. And here's the paradox. The more comfortable you become in solitude, the more magnetic you become in the world. People are drawn to clarity, to calm, to strength that doesn't shout. A man who has faced himself in silence becomes unforgettable. Not because of what he says, but because of what he no longer needs to prove. So if you're in that season right now, no calls, no love life, no plans. Don't panic, don't fill it. Let it stretch, let it speak, because you're not being punished. You're being prepared, and the man who emerges from this silence will walk differently, speak differently, and love differently, not from emptiness, but from power. Now, comment below, I walk through silence, not to escape, but to remember who I am. Number 2, through the fire of silence, when solitude confronts the mask. Imagine silence not as a soft whisper, but as a roaring fire, not comforting, not yet, but cleansing. That first night alone, when there are no more messages, no one watching, and nothing left to distract you, is when the flame begins. Most men mistake this heat for punishment. In truth, it's a ritual. Solitude is not quiet because it lacks sound. It's quiet because it burns through illusion. We often think of loneliness as the absence of others, but that's not what makes it terrifying. What we fear is what comes into focus when others are gone. The regrets, the dreams unfulfilled, the decisions we postponed, the man we said we would become but never did. These truths sit just beneath the surface, waiting for the noise to fade, and when it finally does, they rise like smoke. That's why most people run, from one woman to the next, from one dopamine hit to the next, scrolling through strangers' lives, texting just to fill the space, saying yes to things we don't even want. All of it is a distraction from the most dangerous thing we can face, ourselves. The silence doesn't scream, it reflects. It shows you the version of you that has been curated by convenience. Agreeable, likable, busy, the man who avoids conflict, not because he's peaceful, but because he fears being disliked. The man who stays in a relationship, not because he's in love, but because he's terrified of starting over. The man who laughs when he wants to challenge, and apologizes for things he never did. That man, that mask, burns fast in solitude. And beneath the ashes is something rare, clarity. At first, it's painful. Solitude doesn't pat you on the back. It exposes the parts of you that were never yours to begin with. The borrowed goals, the fake confidence, the crowd-pleasing words. But then, as the storm calms, something strange happens. You start hearing your own voice again, not the reactive voice that's been conditioned to survive, but the steady one, shaped by truth. Stoic philosophy has always taught that the man who knows himself is free. Epictetus reminds us, freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control, and what lies beyond your control more than others' approval. The addiction to being seen, being liked, being wanted, it is a chain. Solitude breaks it. The man who stays in that fire, who doesn't numb himself with distractions, who doesn't silence the silence, begins to reclaim his life. He stops asking, "Do they like me?" and starts asking, "Do I like me?" That shift is everything. It's the difference between chasing connection and choosing it, between proving value and possessing it. This detox from approval is not easy. It's a withdrawal. You'll want to reach for your phone, check who viewed your story, message someone just to feel alive. But each time you resist that urge, you reclaim a part of yourself. You move from reaction to intention, from noise to signal. Eventually, you stop laughing at jokes that aren't funny. You stop saying maybe when you mean no. You stop tolerating shallow because you've tasted depth. And now, nothing else will satisfy. In that state, your presence changes. You walk into rooms differently. You don't try to be noticed, but people notice you. You speak less, but when you do, it lands. Your eyes no longer search. They observe, because you are no longer looking for yourself in others' reflection. You've found yourself in your own silence. And when love comes again, because it will, you won't need it to complete you. You'll choose it from fullness, not from hunger. You'll attract someone who values your stillness, not just your performance, someone who doesn't fear your solitude, but respects it, because she senses it made you whole. So let the silence stretch. Let it feel like a storm. Let it challenge the parts of you that were built on needing to be chosen. Because when the storm passes, you will not just have survived. You will have emerged as a man whose value is no longer negotiable. Now, speak out and comment below. I no longer chase approval. I stand in my own voice. Number 3, the mirror of solitude. Finding the man you were meant to be. There's a moment in every man's solitude where the noise of the world finally dies. No more commentary, no more competition, no more pretending, and in that silence, a new frequency emerges, not from the outside, but from within. This is not isolation, this is clarity, and for the man who dares to listen, it changes everything. When the world is loud, you move on autopilot, you wake up and chase what others chase. You strive for goals that aren't truly yours. You date women who align with an image you're trying to uphold, not a life you actually want. You define success by standards that sound good at parties, but feel hollow in your chest. In that chaos, you never stop to ask, is this even me? Solitude slows you down, painfully. Beautifully, it disrupts the momentum of performance. It puts your dreams under a microscope and whispers, whose are these? And the truth is, many men don't know. They inherited them from culture, from their fathers, from Instagram. But in solitude, those illusions begin to fall away. The stillness becomes a mirror, not to your face, but to your soul. You begin to ask questions without fear of being judged. What am I pretending to enjoy? What part of me is still a boy trying to be liked? What do I really want? Not for show, but for soul. And most importantly, who am I when no one is looking? At first, the answers are uncomfortable. They may shake the foundation of your choices, but discomfort is not your enemy. It is a sign you're nearing the truth. Stoic philosophy teaches us that we grow not through pleasure, but through discomfort rightly understood. Marcus Aurelius reminds us, if it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it. But how do you know what is right and true? You must first know yourself, and that only happens in silence. As you stay in solitude, a strange kind of peace starts to grow. It's not immediate. It's earned. You stop needing to be anywhere you're not respected. You stop twisting your personality to match your environment. You begin to move with precision, not because you're rigid, but because you're rooted. And that rootedness gives birth to a new kind of freedom. You don't rush to reply. You don't over-explain your choices. You don't tolerate drama, not out of superiority, but out of alignment. You've come to know your value, not because someone affirmed it, but because you finally sat with it long enough to believe it. Solitude doesn't just teach you who you are, it teaches you what to cut. You let go of relationships that once defined you but now drain you. You let go of habits that numbed you but never served you. You redesign your routine, not for aesthetics, but for intention. Every habit becomes a vote for the man you want to be, not someday, but today. This man, born from silence, becomes rare. He doesn't need validation. He doesn't play games. He doesn't fear rejection, because he's no longer applying for approval. He's built a life so aligned with who he is that rejection no longer feels like loss. It feels like guidance. In relationships, this man becomes magnetic, not because he's trying to impress, but because he's impossible to manipulate. He loves deeply, but never desperately. He gives space without fear and speaks truth without apology. He doesn't chase. He chooses, and that difference is everything. This is why clarity through solitude is so powerful. It's not about becoming someone new. It's about remembering who you were before the world told you who to be. It's about stripping away everything that's not yours so you can finally live, speak, and love from a place that's real. So take the time, embrace the quiet, ask the hard questions, cut the noise, because the man you are becoming isn't out there. He's already inside, waiting for you to get quiet enough to meet him. Now, comment below, in solitude, I remember who I truly am. Number 4, solitude as discipline, how isolation builds a man that can't be moved. There is a lie we've been fed since boyhood, that the man who is constantly surrounded, constantly validated, constantly in demand, is the one who wins. But what if that's backwards? What if the man who willingly walks into solitude, not to escape, but to refine, is the one who becomes unshakable? Because solitude, when chosen with intention, isn't loneliness, it's training. And the man who enters it consciously learns something no amount of external success can teach: self-command. When a man stops trying to fill every moment, when he pauses the need to reply, impress, or be wanted, he enters a sacred space where his actions begin to align with his core. This is where discipline is born, not out of obligation, but from clarity. In solitude, you're no longer driven by urgency, you're moved by alignment. You no longer ask, "What should I do today?" You ask, "What matters enough to deserve my energy?" And this shift, from reaction to intentionality, is everything. You start waking up earlier, not because you should, but because the morning silence reminds you of your sovereignty. You begin training your body not just for aesthetics, but as a reflection of your inner control. You stop negotiating with excuses. You set boundaries, even with yourself. You say no, not out of scarcity, but out of wisdom. That's when the real power emerges. You stop being nice to avoid tension. You stop answering texts that drain you. You begin to treat your time as sacred, your energy as valuable, and your attention as currency. And slowly, your entire presence changes. The world feels it. Women feel it. Not because you've become arrogant, but because you're no longer available to be pulled in 1,000 directions. You've chosen yourself, not once, but daily, through your actions, your habits, your solitude. In Stoic terms, this is temperance and autarkeia, the idea that fulfillment and strength come from within, not from the shifting opinions of the crowd. As Epictetus said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." Solitude becomes the forge in which this mastery is developed, and each day you practice it. You harden into a presence that can't be manipulated, shamed, or swayed. In love, this man is rare. He does not need a partner to feel whole, but because he is whole, he attracts someone who respects his boundaries, aligns with his purpose, and never feels the need to tame him, because she sees the fire in his restraint. Solitude becomes your reset, your filter. It clears the residue of shallow interactions, cheap dopamine, and approval seeking. You no longer chase connection out of fear. You choose it from abundance. And because of that, your standards rise. You don't settle for drama. You don't tolerate disrespect. You don't cling to anyone who doesn't match your peace. This is the man women don't forget, not because he's flashy or loud, but because he is rooted, and in a world of men seeking attention. The one who can disappear into himself without losing his strength is magnetic. So ask yourself, can you sit alone in a room without needing to reach for a screen, a person, or a vice? Can you go a day without seeking recognition? Can you move through life not needing to prove you matter, because you already know? If you can answer yes, or if you're working toward that yes, then you are already becoming something rare, a man whose silence speaks louder than others' noise. And from that space, everything you attract, love, purpose, connection, will come not because you hunted it, but because your presence became a beacon, not desperate, not performative, but deeply, undeniably real. Now, speak out and comment below. I train in solitude because I refuse to be controlled. Number 5. The man who masters solitude becomes the one no one can shake. Most people are waiting for the world to choose them, for love to show up, for success to knock, for validation to arrive in the form of applause. But the man who masters solitude no longer waits. He chooses himself, and that choice shifts the gravitational pull of his entire life. When you accept solitude not as punishment, but as preparation, you begin to notice how little of what you once chased was truly necessary. You stop performing. You stop chasing approval, women, or distractions that used to fill the emptiness. Instead, you begin to build, quietly, with precision. You remove everything that doesn't serve your center, friendships that drain you, routines that clutter your clarity, habits that chip away at your power. You become intentional, not because you hate the world, but because you finally made peace with your own. And from that peace rises a strength few can match. This man is no longer available in the way society wants him to be. He's not easy to impress, because he knows what real substance feels like. He's not easy to manipulate, because he no longer needs to be liked. He's not easy to keep, unless you offer alignment, not attachment. And that's what makes him rare. When he walks into a room, he doesn't need to dominate. His stillness speaks. People respect him before he opens his mouth, not out of fear, but out of instinct, because they sense he has nothing to prove and everything to offer. He has discipline without rigidity, compassion without codependence, love without weakness. In relationships, he no longer asks to be chosen. He observes, he invites, he leads, not by control, but by clarity. He does not chase. Why would he? He has learned the difference between attention and resonance, between chemistry and compatibility. He values the woman who meets him with emotional integrity, because he no longer feels flattered by the chase. He's not looking for validation. He's looking for vision. And when he loves, he does it fully, not because he's desperate, but because he's full. He doesn't give to impress. He gives because he has something real to give. But the moment his peace is threatened, his standards are crossed, or his clarity is clouded, he doesn't beg. He walks away, not from ego, but from alignment. This man doesn't need drama. He doesn't feed off chaos. He doesn't mistake intensity for depth, because he's tasted something better, clarity bought through silence, and he's unwilling to trade it for shallow highs. This is the Stoic ideal in modern form, a man who no longer relies on fortune, opinion, or flattery. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one, and in solitude, you finally become one, not in the eyes of others, but in the mirror that no one else sees." So here is the truth. You don't need more motivation. You don't need to be liked. You don't even need to be understood. You need solitude, because in solitude, you meet the most important man you'll ever know, yourself. And when you finally master him, everything else, love, purpose, peace, stops feeling like something you chase. It becomes something you naturally attract. So take the walk alone. Sit in the quiet, feel the discomfort, and smile. Because you're not falling apart. You're returning to the man you were always meant to be. Now, comment below, I choose solitude, because I choose mastery. You started this video wondering if your singleness meant you were falling behind. Now you know, it means you're rising above the noise. Because in solitude, you master emotional control. You define your own values. The time you sharpen your vision without distraction. And you stop tolerating anything that dilutes your peace. You're not alone because you can't find someone. You're alone because you refuse to lose yourself for temporary company. Carl Jung once said, "Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakens." And when a man chooses to awaken alone, he becomes the man no woman can manipulate, and every wise woman respects. If you're ready to continue that journey in strength, like this video, subscribe, and comment. Solitude builds me. The world will feel the result. Stay still, stay sharp, because the man who stays alone by choice returns to the world with unstoppable clarity.